Good evening, everyone. My name is Christina Nguyen. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the ACLU of Oregon's Membership Engagement Officer. Although somehow we're at the end of January, I'd like to wish you all a happy new year. And thank you so much for joining us tonight and for your commitment to a more just Oregon. Last week, the 2021 Oregon legislative session kicked off, and tonight we're excited to share the ACLU of Oregon's priorities for the session. Tonight, you'll hear from a few of our partners from Next Up, NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, Latino Network, and Strategies 360, and we'll tell you about how we're working in collaboration and how you can join us and stay engaged throughout the session. This event is recorded and will be available on our website tomorrow, so please feel free to share with your friends and family who couldn't make it tonight. We'll also be throwing a lot of information at you through the slides and also documents and links in the chat box, but don't worry, I'll follow up tomorrow with all the resources and links so that tonight you can just sit back and listen. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our captioner, Gail Slater from LNS Captioning, and our amazing ASL interpreter, Lo Aviles. If you prefer to have the interpreter's window larger and the rest of the participants' or slides window smaller, you can use the toggle feature on your Zoom account to adjust the screens to your liking. We will also have a short Q&A session towards the end, so please send your questions using the Q&A box, not the chat box. And if anyone needs ASL interpretation to ask a question, just let us know by sending us a message in the chat box. So to get us warmed up, I'd like you all to check out the map on your screen. And once you see the map, I'd like you to locate yourselves. Where are you tuning in from tonight? And answer the poll by sharing where you're at, and I'll share the results in a moment. While you're doing that, and before we dive in, I'd like to ground us today in group agreements, which applies to all event elements, including the chat, the Q&A box, and the live conversation. By participating today, it is our expectation that you will create a space which values and respects differences of race, ethnicity, immigration status, age, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, ability, and socioeconomic circumstance. We will all each respect and contribute to the ACLU's culture of belonging and by fostering an equitable and inclusive experience in all aspects of community work by centering BIPOC voices and experiences. This will look like listening to understand, making space for and prioritizing oppressed voices, speaking my truth responsibly, taking responsibility for your impact regardless of your intent, and for white people and other privileged identities to not put the burden on BIPOC and other oppressed groups to educate you about the harm that your actions and behavior created. And being willing to do things differently and experience discomfort, and seeing the discomfort and tension as an opportunity to grow, not a barrier to it. Thank you for your willingness to be here with us and honoring this space. Okay, so let's check out the results of our poll and see where folks are at. So I'm happy to see that we've got some representation from all over the state, and that I'm so glad that we have so much commitment from folks statewide for a better Oregon. So to kick us off into the nitty-gritties today, I'd like to introduce our ACLU of Oregon Policy Director, Andrea Valderrama. Andrea, thanks so much for making time to chat with our supporters tonight. I know how busy session can get, and as our policy director and one of our newest teammates, can you get us all grounded in your approach and philosophy around policymaking?
Absolutely, Christina. Thank you so much to all of you. Welcome this evening. Very much looking forward to this event tonight. You know, it has truly been an honor to join the team here at the ACLU of Oregon for the past couple of months. Since I arrived, this team has proved time and time again how hardworking and committed they all are to strengthening and protecting our civil liberties and our civil rights. And I'm so grateful to be working alongside so many experts and seasoned organizers, and I'm looking forward to what we will accomplish together this year and in the years to come. It's difficult for me to talk about where we've headed without sharing a little bit about where we've been, and we have all been through a lot this past year. Legislatively speaking, in addition to a regular in addition to a regular legislative session last year, we also engaged in an additional 3 special legislative sessions, advocating for bills ranging from police accountability, COVID relief, and the extension of the eviction moratorium, to name a few. Our agenda is only as powerful as the people power behind it, tried and true principle. Deep appreciations to those of you who showed up and turned out to advocate for these priorities. It's because of these efforts that we've been successful. 2,202 of you sent emails in support of HB 4401, calling on leaders to extend the eviction moratorium and create a landlord compensation fund. The bill successfully passed, and on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon, we thank you for your advocacy. With those and other successes behind us, we must continue forward. Since joining the team, I have done extensive outreach to coalition partners, key stakeholders, lawyers, committee members, elected officials, and impacted communities to identify and set our priorities for this 2021 legislative session. We're now here in front of you, some of our most important stakeholders, our members, and our community partners. You are essential to our advocacy efforts, so thank you again so much for being here. Our policy program values leading with race in all of our policy and advocacy efforts, as well as centering BIPOC and BIPOC communities, immigrant and refugees, individuals with altering abilities, and other disproportionately impacted communities. Nothing about us without us. So with that, I'm excited to introduce some amazing community leaders and coalition partners as I walk through our 2021 state legislative agenda. Our agenda this year is organized into 5 different categories: strengthening democracy, health and wellness, consumer privacy and cybersecurity, criminal and restorative justice, and public and community safety. For each category, we have a super special guest joining us to provide you all a little more context on the priority bill in each category. And then at the end, we're going to have time for questions and a call to action for you all, so stay tuned for that. So for the first section, we have strengthening democracy. This is a central area for the ACLU, and this category of our agenda includes LC 2276, campaign finance reform, SB 571, HB 2366, restoration of voting rights, true representation, and some of the coalition partners that we have for restoration of voting rights include APANO, AFSCME, OJRC, PPAO, NARAL, Our Oregon, and of course the ACLU of Oregon. We're looking forward to engage in a new way on campaign finance reform and are excited to see newly formed committee on redistricting. Here to join us to do a little bit of a deeper dive into HB 2366, restoration of voting rights, is the executive director of Next Up, Samantha Gladue. Some of you may remember that Next Up was formerly called the BUS Project and works with young people on civic engagement and shifting power. Take it away, Samantha.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm very happy to be here and have you all as partners in the fight for a more just democracy, and to share a little bit more about Senate Bill 571 and House Bill 2366, the restoration of voting rights bills. We are excited to be working in coalition with APANO, AFSCME, Oregon Justice Resource Center, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, NARAL, Our Oregon, and of course the ACLU. This bill would allow people in prison for a felony to register to vote, and also update voter registration and vote in elections while incarcerated. Currently, we restore the right to vote after a prison sentence has been completed, and the only time that we disenfranchise people is when they are in prison. Ending felony disenfranchisement is essential for racial justice and righting the wrongs by politicians who founded our state with a constitution that explicitly excluded Black people from living here. Taking away a person's right to vote who has been convicted of a felony has never been about punishing someone who committed a crime. It is an overt and intended effort to block Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, and low-income people from voting. And because of our best in the nation voting system, we know that we can easily and affordably extend vote by mail to prisons. The political will is here too. This effort has gained traction from many influential lawmakers and been declared a priority of our BIPOC caucus. 95% of Oregonians in prison return to our communities. Removing them from community is punishment. We should not take away their political power and autonomy. This bill ends felony disenfranchisement by allowing prisoners to vote and situates them at their most recent address, not the prison address. It is a change in statute which addresses the part of our state constitution which says that felony convicted prisoners cannot vote unless otherwise provided by law. We plan to move the Senate version, Senate Bill 571, through the Judiciary Committee, and you can hear much more about it by going to nextuporegon.org, in particular the events page. We're kicking off monthly letter writing events to our incarcerated Oregonian community members to make sure that they're up to date about the bill.
Thanks so much, Samantha. Next up, we have our health and wellness category. We stand in solidarity with our incredible allies and the reproductive justice movement, and this year is no exception. Access to comprehensive healthcare services has never been more essential. And here to join us to share a little bit more about the Equal Access to Care Coalition and HB 2362 is Christelle Allen, Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon.
Thanks, Toraya, and thank you everyone who is on this call tonight. It's just really wonderful to be among friends and to have the opportunity to work with partners like ACLU and just meet with a great, just a wonderful group of people that is incredibly passionate about freedom and justice, who, like myself, recognize that access to abortion is absolutely fundamental to these values. In 2017, I'm guessing a few folks on this call tonight were part of the amazing coalition that came together to pass the Reproductive Health Equity Act, which continues to be just the highest bar for the most inclusive reproductive state bill in the country. And at NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, we feel so incredibly fortunate to remain in coalition with partners like ACLU, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Oregon, Forward Together, Basic Rights Oregon, SEIU 49, Oregon Nurses Association, and with some new partners like Compassion and Choices, Cascade AIDS Project, Prism Health. We are, as Drea mentioned, working together to pass House Bill 2362, the Equal Access to Care Act, which was introduced this year by Representative Andrea Salinas. Central to this legislation is the idea that healthcare is a basic human right and everyone should be able to access quality, affordable care. And as essential services, healthcare must include gender-affirming care, reproductive and sexual healthcare, care for those who may have an HIV-positive diagnosis, and compassionate end-of-care options. Who we are and how we identify should never determine the level of access or the quality of care we receive, and neither should big healthcare mergers. But unfortunately, in Oregon and around the country, corporate consolidation is making affordable care more and more challenging due to the size and scope of major healthcare interests. And while safety net providers are facing great challenges to care for the diverse communities they serve around our state, some healthcare entities are seeing large revenue increases during this pandemic. And as a result, we know that the majority of harm will inevitably fall on those who already face the biggest barriers to care, most often due to race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, immigration status, income level, or geographic location. Our coalition, the Equal Access to Care Coalition, came together to ensure that we have safeguards in place to maintain and improve access to these essential healthcare services. And with COVID-19 further highlighting existing inequities in our state, now is the time to address these systemic issues so that everyone has the opportunity to receive the quality care that we all deserve. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and please be in touch through ACLU and others to follow this really important bill as we work to really put equity first in healthcare this session.
Thank you so much, Christelle. I am feeling the people power here. I love it. Our next item that we have is consumer privacy and cybersecurity. This pandemic has highlighted existing inequities and taught us the importance of thoughtful and innovative approaches to regulating data sharing practices and protecting our civil rights, even digitally. Chloe Becker, Senior Director of Government Affairs and Director of Political Engagement with Strategies 360, will be one of our main lobbyists this session and is here to talk a little bit more about her work on this issue. Chloe?
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here tonight and introduce myself to all of you as a part of the ACLU of Oregon's lobby team this session. As a part of that role, I'm leading our engagement in DOJ's work related to privacy. So along with other advocates like CUB and OSPRG, the ACLU of Oregon was initially a part of the Attorney General's Task Force on Consumer Privacy. Due to uncertainties around the virtual legislative session as a whole and challenges with bill drafting, the AG decided to pivot away from a larger consumer privacy concept and focus on privacy as it relates to contact tracing. So we've been a part of a larger work group focused on crafting a concept to ensure that the protection and privacy of all who are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic is taken into account when we think about contact tracing. So we are still waiting to see a final bill draft, but a couple points that we've been advocating for and will continue to advocate for to ensure consumer privacy are data minimization, a clear public health purpose for any contact tracing, really strict deletion requirements, making sure that there's absolutely no sale or transfer of any data, and as a baseline, that there are just very clear opt-in and opt-out provisions. So while we're working on this during the 2021 session, we anticipate that the larger conversation around consumer privacy will come back in some form, and we're really excited to engage in that again. I am happy to answer questions about this or other bills we're working on during the Q&A or later on, and I'm just really excited to be working on moving this policy agenda forward on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon.
Thanks, Chloe, and I am just so excited that we have Chloe's expertise and the team at Strategies 360 to help us move this agenda forward. We're very, very lucky to have that this year. Our next section is the justice system and restorative justice. Our top priority this session is the implementation of Measure 110, the decriminalization of drug possession and access to treatment services. Centering our values in decriminalization, we're also leading advocates for expungement and calling for it to be free and automatic. I'm very excited to present to you all Jennifer Williamson, currently serving as Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at Strategies 360, and most previously served as our Majority Leader right here in Oregon. Jennifer will be one of our leads on Measure 110 implementation and expungement, and we couldn't be luckier to have her. Jennifer?
Oh, okay. Sorry, my video and my microphone weren't working. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I am so honored to be here and to have been a card-carrying member of the ACLU for the last 30 years and to be one of the lead lobbyists for the ACLU this session. As the previous majority leader, state representative for House District 36, chair of Judiciary and chair of the Public Safety Budget Committee, I look forward to continuing the work on issues that I partnered with the ACLU of Oregon when I was in service in the legislature, and now I get to advocate for on the behalf of all the members of the ACLU of Oregon. These issues include criminal justice reform, decarceration, and decriminalization. This is going to be an action-packed session unlike any one in Oregon's history, and I'm excited to be in the middle of it with the ACLU. This session, as Andrea said, I'll be leading the policy advocacy efforts on the implementation of criminal justice reform and Measure 110, as well as expungement. We'll continue to advocate for expungement that is free and automatic because those that have served their time deserve equitable access to employment, housing, and reentry. We're also working in coalition on a criminal justice reform package in House Bill 2002 to reform Measure 11. The ACLU is committed to ensure that people actually impacted by these laws are at the table, sharing their experiences and sharing how these laws play out in our communities. You can find any of the bills mentioned tonight by any one of the speakers on the Oregon Legislative Information System, also known as OLIS, and it's on the legislative webpage. You can find the bills there, you can watch the hearings, you can see how these bills are playing out in real time since this is a virtual session. So don't hesitate to reach out to anyone on this team if you have questions about any of these bills or any other thing that the ACLU of Oregon is working on in the legislature. And I look forward to the next 6 months and moving this agenda forward on behalf of the ACLU of Oregon and all of its members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're going to have a lot of victories this year, which I'm very excited about. Our last section of our agenda is public and community safety. As thousands of protesters took to the streets saying Black Lives Matter, we called for additional police accountability and civil rights protections. This last category of our agenda includes the Oregon Sanctuary Promise Act and legislation around identification on police uniforms during riots. Here to join us and share a little bit more about the Oregon Sanctuary Promise Act is a familiar face, Leland Baxter Neal, who is now the Advocacy Director at Latino Network. Take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. Hello, everybody. My name is Leland Baxter Neal. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Advocacy for Latino Network and alum of the ACLU of Oregon. And I'm so glad to be here to join my former colleagues and forever allies in this critical work. One of our top priorities this session in immigrants' rights is the Sanctuary Promise Act, which is a bold and comprehensive package of improvements really intended to finally make the promise of sanctuary a reality in the state. As many of you know, Oregon has one of the nation's oldest, actually the oldest statewide sanctuary law. And you may remember that in 2018, we defended that law when we successfully beat back ballot measure 105. Oregonians across the state voted overwhelmingly to remain a sanctuary state. However, our sanctuary law really does not work as intended. Across the state, law enforcement agencies routinely communicate, cooperate, and collaborate with federal immigration authorities like ICE agents. Through an ACLU of Oregon lawsuit resulting in tens of thousands of internal ICE documents, we've seen the true extent of ICE's infiltration into our local systems. What that looks like is county jails that send daily automated reports to ICE of all foreign-born individuals in their custody. And it looks like jail deputies coordinating with ICE to make sure that they can arrest individuals when they're released from custody. It looks like probation officers coordinating with ICE officers so that they can show up at particular probation appointments, surprise the individuals and detain them for deportation. It also looks like assistant district attorneys providing information about the individuals that they prosecute to ICE. In short, ICE is communicating and working with individuals in our state and local governments at all sorts of levels. The Sanctuary Act, if promised, would change this in 4 specific ways. First, it would update the language in our sanctuary statute to prohibit any and all cooperation between local government agencies and law enforcement and federal immigration authorities. Second, it would allow someone to bring a lawsuit if our sanctuary law is violated, something that's not currently allowed under Oregon law. Third, it would ban private prison companies from opening immigrant detention centers in Oregon, and it would prohibit our local jails from contracting with ICE to detain individuals in immigration custody. And we would truly make Oregon a state free of immigrant detention. And fourth, it would prohibit ICE from making warrantless immigration arrests in and around courthouses, a rule that already exists within the court system, thanks to advocacy by the ACLU of Oregon and others. This bill is based on community-identified problems and community-identified solutions, and is the work of a broad coalition of organizations, including the ACLU of Oregon, Latino Network, CAUSA, the Fair Shot Coalition, Coalition of Communities of Color, and the Oregon Ready Coalition. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all so much, Samantha, Christelle, Chloe, Jennifer and Leland for joining us today for this event and for going over all of these amazing coalitions and efforts. I am just so pumped and excited to have some wins this year with you all. So thank you. We are going to go ahead and open it up for questions now. Please feel free to add into the Q&A if you have not already. And I will turn it back over to Christina.
Thanks, Andrea. I would like to welcome all of our guest speakers back up so that they can take on our audience questions. Now, don't be shy. Please send your Q&As into the Q&A box, not the chat box. And again, if you need ASL interpretation to ask your question, just let us know in the chat box. We asked our registrants to share some questions they had ahead of time, so we'll start with that. This one will be for you, Samantha. Tanya's didn't realize that people couldn't vote in prison. She thought that everyone could do that. So what can folks like Tanya do to make sure that this bill passes? Samantha?
Such an awesome question, right? And there is a lot of misinformation about who can vote when they have a conviction. In particular, doing voter registration drives, we often hear, oh, I can't vote, I'm a felon, right? So we hear the other side of that coin, because there are some states which revoke the right to vote always. But in Oregon, we only take it away while people are in prison for a felony. And the best way to make sure that this bill passes is to contact your legislators and contact your friends to contact their legislators. So far, the bill has 15 sponsors across both chambers, and some really influential lawmakers are backing it. But we need to show that grassroots ACLU power, right? So please reach out to everybody. In the coming weeks, we will have a form where you can contact your legislators, which we will absolutely circulate with our partners at ACLU. And again, like I mentioned, we're doing monthly letter writing nights to Oregonians in prison to keep that conversation going. And that's a really big deal for making sure that their voices are central to this fight.
Thanks, Samantha. I appreciate it. The next question I'm going to send over to Leland. David is wondering about the status of the sanctuary legislation. Can you elaborate more on how our current law is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the big problems in our current law is that it doesn't allow for individuals to bring a lawsuit if the law is violated. The courts call it a private right of action. And without that private right of action, two problems. One, there's no accountability for violations. And two, the court system can't weigh in on how the language should be interpreted. So gray areas in the law haven't been fixed. And within those gray areas, law enforcement and ICE have proliferated in their cooperation and created dangerous circumstances for immigrant communities and communities of color. Our provision would just, our bill would clearly prohibit any and all types of cooperation, collaboration, or communication between local law enforcement and ICE.
And the next question, thanks Leland, by the way. Always appreciate getting a chance to work with you. Next question is for Chloe. You mentioned opt-in and opt-out. Can you be a little bit more expansive on that?
Thanks, Christina. On that, just to give further clarification, I was meaning opting in and opting out of contact tracing. So being really explicit about whether or not you're opting in, and then if you opt in and decide you don't want to be a part of it anymore, making sure there's a way that you're able to opt out. So that's what I was meaning by opting in and opting out.
Great, thank you. For the next question, I'll throw it to Christelle. There are folks wondering, why is the Equal Access to Care bill needed now?
Some of folks may have seen some news earlier this spring that came out about a potential merger, including Care Oregon, which is Oregon's biggest Medicaid management organization. Many people, almost 400,000 in the Portland area, receive their care. And the merger was potentially with one of Oregon's biggest private and health insurance plans, but also one of the largest networks of hospitals and also is religiously affiliated. And so this deal was fortunately not moved forward, but we expect, and experts are telling us, that this is just the tipping point, that COVID is an opportunity for additional consolidation to happen. And there was a recent 60 Minutes episode which found that no other reason besides healthcare consolidation could explain why a place like Sacramento, California is the most expensive place in America to have a child. That is one incredible, just the cost effectiveness of what this is weighing on families. But going back to the situation we had here in Oregon with Providence and Care Oregon, I think it's shown a light on just the ability for one particular entity's policies to really become so large of scale because of how big our corporate hospital and healthcare entities are growing, that those internal practices and policies have a huge impact on what access looks like overall. And so this is a situation right now where we have a huge healthcare crisis, but also there are places and there are entities that are seeing record revenue. And if we did see, like we think we can expect, a rash of mergers and acquisitions occur in these next resulting period after COVID, we wouldn't be able to descramble the eggs. And so that's why we are working on this now. And healthcare continues to be such a major issue for so many families. It's such a cost driver, and people just need more assurances to know that the care that they need, essential services like abortion and birth control, gender affirming care, compassionate end of life options, that those are available regardless of these larger forces that often we are unprotected from currently.
Thanks, Christelle. I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up question. Cindy's wondering about whether the bill will give health care to those who cannot afford it, or is it more to make sure that certain things are included in the care people receive?
The bill is really it's a common sense just set of requiring that, we are looking at the state's role and just getting a big picture by asking those entities that are interested in officially merging or acquiring another to answer one of three things. Does this legislation improve or does it potentially improve healthcare affordability? And the second is, does it expand access and options for a local community? Or two, does it advance equity in our state? And really, we're just asking that they meet one of three. So this is really common sense. Similar legislation in Massachusetts has been up and running and maintaining cost containment in that state for nearly 10 years. It's a really common sense approach, and we look forward to working on it with partners like ACLU.
Thank you. Before I get to a couple more questions, I want to wrap up a couple of quick ones. This call is recorded, and you all will get a link to it tomorrow, also with the documents we shared and the links we shared, so you can just enjoy tonight and also share with your friends and family. And yes, the ACLU of Oregon is having a virtual lobby day. So please stay tuned and stay engaged. We are setting a date for the end of April of 2021. So stay tuned for that. My next question from the audience is a free for all for any of our panelists. Can you talk about, maybe Andrea, you start, how do we choose which bills to support?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think, first and foremost, my philosophy around policymaking is always people before policy, never policy before people. And so there's always an extensive level of coalition building, organizing, and outreach to those directly impacted. And so that's what I was talking about at the beginning, is making sure that we're not just talking about things or people that are not directly impacted, but that we're engaging them meaningfully and that we're asking the questions, what is the problem, what is the need, and how can we, through legislation and policy and advocacy, help meet that need. And so this agenda has been really thoughtfully crafted with our partners, as you can see here today, as well as several others who really have identified that this is the moment, this is the time for these specific issues. I don't know if others have other points to add there too, but that's our approach.
Christina, I'd love to add a piece of work that I think people don't recognize, how much the ACLU does in defense, defending against bad policies and bad bills. Having been a legislator, the ACLU of Oregon is fighting the good fight against terrible policy all day, every day during legislative sessions. And we don't often talk about that, that we move a proactive agenda, but there's also a lot of redirecting ideas, helping to change ideas to make them better, and frankly, just killing bad ideas. So it's a really important role the ACLU plays in Salem, and I just want to make sure that it's recognized, because it is a lot of work down there to make sure that the values of the ACLU are protected in Oregon law.
Thanks, Jennifer. Before I go to the next question, I'm wondering if anybody else on the panel wants to add, maybe Samantha?
Yeah, can you please restate the question?
Yes, the question is, how do you choose which bills to support?
Yeah, we support bills based on really what young people care about. And we have a niche of defending our democracy and always working to advance it. At Next Up, formerly the BUS Project, our work has contributed to 90.2% of eligible Oregonians being registered to vote, and Oregon being the #1 easiest state to vote in, right? We passed the nation's first ever automatic voter registration law. We, back in 2009, made sure that Oregonians could get with the times and register to vote online. We're once again seeking to improve that. And we've paved the way for pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, and are working to advance the lower the voting age, right? Modernize it. And this idea of restoration of voting rights came about when, through our work, we were invited to McLaren Youth Correctional Facility and met with a group of incarcerated young men there, along with some law students. And we talked about voting rights, the fact that they can't vote, and the fact that Measure 11, when it passed, had so few votes, and what it would have been like had everyone voted and turned out. And everyone had a conversation and voted in that moment, yes, we want to restore voting rights. So for 3 years, we've been carrying forward that charge and are so pumped that it's at the place it is now. And Marlene, I see your question, what does the BUS Project think about ranked choice voting? I am happy to share that we are co-leading along with partners on 3 different bills to advance ranked choice voting in the state legislature. They vary in scope. One would allow ranked choice voting for military and overseas elections. It's kind of more of a test. Another would require that all new voting machines in Oregon are able to count elections that are in ranked choice voting format. And the third, the big one, would move our elections toward ranked choice voting. You can see more on that if you look up Oregon ranked choice voting. There's a coalition built out of Benton County that's ready to go, and we're working closely with Representative Rayfield.
Thanks, Samantha. My next question is for Jennifer, and it's from Gina. Gina would really like to know more about how to help with the Restorative Act Measure 110. How can she help?
I think, like every bill that's been mentioned here, reaching out to legislators to tell them the importance to voters in Oregon and to their constituents of implementing the will of the voters from ballot measure 110. I think the big battle we'll have in Salem is around money this session, like many sessions, and making sure that money that needs to go to treatment, because voters in Oregon said that's where they want money to go, actually goes to treatment and it's not diverted to other budgets, but that we really move the conversation around addiction and treatment and dealing with folks in the system to a healthcare system out of the criminal justice system. And I think it's important for legislators to hear from people that this is how they voted on Measure 110. They meant what they said when they voted on Measure 110, and the legislature needs to implement Measure 110 as the voters intended, not go in and delay it or deny treatment to folks who are looking for treatment, or requiring them to go into the criminal justice system to get treatment. So again, reaching out to legislators. Floyd Przonski is chairing the Senate Judiciary and Measure 110 Committee. In both chambers, the behavioral health committees are dealing with this measure. The House Judiciary Committee is dealing with it, and the budget committees will be dealing with it. So there's plenty of legislators to reach out to, but make sure you reach out to your own as well, whether or not they're involved in this, because every legislator is going to have to vote on the implementation of this act.
Thanks, Jennifer. And then a couple more. Folks are interested in expungement. Practically, how's it implemented?
Sure, I can start. Expungement in Oregon is a process that you apply for to the court. It costs money. It's super complicated. I believe the number is still 14% of those who could have their records expunged under marijuana legalization were able to do it, partially because the process is so expensive and so confusing. In addition, the district attorneys can oppose expungement in the county where the conviction happened. So that is also a barrier for some folks. We are working on a process, especially under Measure 110, where the court would automatically change people's records to reflect ballot Measure 110 without anyone ever having to file paperwork, hire a lawyer, or go see a judge. It's really important that people most impacted by criminal records be able to expunge them when the law allows them to, and not be held back by their inability to afford a lawyer, afford court fees and fines, and file really complicated paperwork.
Thanks, Jennifer. And then to close, perhaps the most important question of all, and I'll ask every speaker to answer it, is how can folks get involved? How can they engage with lawmakers, and especially during a pandemic, and also engage with your organizations? I'll have you all answer and pass it along, and I'll let Andrea close on that one. So let's start with Christelle.
This is a session that's unlike any other. We are going to be, as an introvert, I really love the idea of potentially testifying it at home and not having big, scary legislators. We have a former one on this video tonight, but it can be something that's a little intimidating. And so this is an opportunity to really get involved in the process. One thing that is incredibly impactful, especially when we are working to destigmatize abortion care and other services for those who are interested, is just sharing stories. And sometimes those stories are really challenging, but this is a session where the whole challenges of going down to Salem and spending half a day, we're going to be figuring this out together. And so I just wanted to, in the chat, share a link to think about sharing your story. And this one is particular, that if you have ever been denied or delayed care, we know that 1 in 3, the study was on women in particular, were denied or delayed an appointment to have reproductive care due to COVID. Those are things that often we can find policy solutions, and we really do believe that the merger and acquisition bill and our coalition are going to be really centering stories on those who have directly been impacted by those barriers. So it's empowering, and it could be even a potentially kind of safer, more comfortable way to do it this session.
Thanks, Christelle. How about Chloe, Jennifer? Do you have any hot tips?
You start, Chloe, go ahead.
I would say one of the best ways that you can get involved is just making sure you know who your legislators are. So I'll share a link in the chat so that you can go online on the Oregon Legislative legislature website and figure out who your senator and representative are, and you can see their contact information there. Like Christelle said, this is a weird session we're in. People aren't in the building right now, and so knowing what phone numbers to call and emails to send your thoughts on kind of all of these bills or other bills that you're thinking about or caring about, your voice can really impact their decision making. So I'll share that link so you know how to find who your representatives and senators are, and you can reach out to them directly.
I would say, as a former legislator, it really does matter when people reach out. People often don't think that an email or a phone call or a letter or a visit matters. It really does. When legislators hear from their constituents in particular, they really stop and take notice. And I think it's incredibly important for people, like Chloe said, to know who their legislators are and to create a relationship with those folks. And so I think the best thing you can do is stay engaged. It'll be easier than ever to testify this session because you can do it from your couch. So don't shy away from engaging in the process, even at the level of testifying. Sorry, my puppy's agreeing with me right now. He's back here in the middle of this. But I do think, don't be shy. If you feel comfortable doing it, reach out to Chloe or me or Andre or anyone on this line to help put together your testimony and to get you ready to testify. We can do that.
Thanks, Jennifer and Chloe and Puppy. What about you, Samantha?
We are so excited to have a youth-centric lobby day on February 15th, a day when there's no school. We are going to have a virtual lobby day hearing from Oregon's youngest legislators, Representative Ricky Ruiz and Wednesday Campos. And we will also hear from our youngest Secretary of State in over a generation, new Secretary of State, Shemia Fagan. It'll be fun. We'll talk about learning how to lobby, what even is the legislature, how do we lobby, why, and then really lead on efforts to modernize the voting age and other democracy reforms. So that's February 15th. You can find more information at nextuporegon.org/events. We're also doing some fun events to learn about our policies a bit more. So restoration of voting rights, letter writing, like I mentioned, we'll be interacting with some media to develop our critical thinking around that issue and just really nerd out and deepen it, feel some love. And then also ranked choice voting. We'll be doing some simulations about ranked choice voting, some watch parties and gatherings to better understand the policy. So come to that lobby day, nextuporegon.org/events.
Thanks, Samantha. Those sound like really fun and engaging opportunities. I hope folks take advantage of that. And Leland, what about you?
Thank you, Christina. I assume if folks are here on this webinar that they follow the ACLU of Oregon. ACLU of Oregon is a critical partner in all of the immigrants' rights work. I think ACLU has either led or partnered on all the major policy victories in the Oregon legislature. So I would urge folks to continue to watch closely as ACLU of Oregon provides information. And on that lobby day coming up will be a great opportunity to plug in. I think, folks have mentioned that this is an unusual year in the legislature because of the virtual session. I think there's something else that feels different about this year, and it's the call to enact legislation that addresses systemic racism and racial justice. So I would urge everybody who's watching to pay attention to those racial justice bills. There's a variety of them moving through the legislature. Catch your legislators and let them know, hold their feet to the fire. This is a moment in our history that we have to use to really move forward an agenda for equity and inclusion in Oregon. A variety of bills that have been discussed today move that agenda, but legislators need to hear from constituents, and ACLU of Oregon constituents have a strong voice in the legislature. So please reach out. Stay tuned through ACLU of Oregon. Also, I believe CAUSA will be having their advocacy day on February 13th, a Saturday. So that will be another opportunity to plug in and support specifically these two immigration bills. But call your legislators, let them know this is the time. Thank you.
And Andrea, last but not least.
Absolutely. I love this question. I feel like it really pulls at all of my organizer heartstrings. I don't think I would be a good organizer if I didn't share with you all a couple of specific ways and asks that we have for you all to get engaged. So stay tuned for this important part. There are 3 ways for ACLU of Oregon that we would love for you all to get engaged with our agenda, advocate with us, and hopefully win all of these items. The first one is that we have created an engagement survey that we'll go ahead and get in the chat for you all to fill out. I highly encourage you to do that. As you heard from just about every one of these panelists, it includes ways for you to say how you would like to engage with your legislator. Would you like to potentially work on some draft testimony or letter writing? Would you participate in our lobby day, which is up and coming? Do you need additional training or lobby 101 in this new virtual reality that we're in? So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey, and we can respond back to you in terms of how you would like to engage and what issues you would like to engage on. So that's the first one. The second one is we have a kind of 2-pronged legislative agenda preview happening here. Tonight is the first part based on our policy advocacy. And as Jennifer and others mentioned, some of these items require budget advocacy. And we know that there are lots of ins and outs in the Oregon budget process. And so we would love to provide you all a budget workshop that goes over really the overall parameters of the budget, how it's set, what the process is, to get a little bit more grounding and understanding in those advocacy efforts. That is going to be scheduled next Thursday, February 4th from 2 to 4. I highly encourage you all to register if you have not already. Again, the link for that will be in the chat. And the third way that you all can engage, so the first one, please fill out the survey. Second one, please join us for the budget training. The last one is our Liberty Dinner. I am so excited to have our Liberty Dinner, which is actually quite close. It's right around the corner. It will be March 12th. And our keynote speaker this year is Nicole Hannah-Jones. I am definitely nerding out. I love her podcast 6019, and I'm just so honored that we will have her as a guest. So please join us there. We'll talk a little bit more about ACLU and our priorities, and just a great additional opportunity for you. So those are 3 ways. Again, we highly encourage you to engage with us in those ways. We will follow up with additional materials for you to review. If you have additional questions, you know how to get a hold of us, and just really appreciate your interest in working in coalition with us and making sure that we're doing what we can for Oregonians here. So I'll turn it back over to Christina to close us out.
Here I am on mute. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, and especially thanks for your leadership. I'd like to thank again our special guest speakers and partners, Samantha from Next Up, Christelle from NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon, Chloe and Jennifer from Strategies 360, and Leland from Latino Network. We are so grateful and proud to be working in partnership. Thank you for sharing with our supporters tonight and getting us excited. And thanks again to Gail for captioning and Lo for ASL interpretation to make tonight successful for our supporters. And to our amazing tech crew for making everything run so smoothly. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for a jam-packed webinar. As you heard, there's so much work to do. I hope this excites you and gets you ready for the long session. I will follow up tomorrow with the recording to this webinar, the resources that everyone shared, and most importantly, please take a few minutes to give us your feedback about the event itself through a SurveyMonkey link, and also the survey that Andrea spoke about before, because we really want to hear from you. We really want to work with you and know how to best engage you in this process. And don't forget to register for next week's budget workshop training and the virtual Liberty Dinner with Nicole Hannah-Jones, which registration is free but is required. Stay tuned for more ways to engage in our work all year long. I hope to see you soon. Thanks everyone and have a wonderful night.